Hello there, I'm Dr. tadhg.blommerde, a senior lecturer at Northumbria University. There seems to be an erroneous idea floating around among some educators that students can just put an assessment question into GenAI and get a perfect answer that will ace the assessment for them, meaning they can cheat easily and without any effort. This is not correct. Today, I'm going to share with you an exciting and innovative approach I took in preparing students for the final assessment of my research methods module. This year, I've embraced the potential of generative AI and encouraged its open use. Some people that I've spoken to think I'm wild for this one, but in my final seminar, I gave students an opportunity to use GenAI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and others, or a combination thereof, to see if they could cheat the final assessment or just get some help with it. I challenge students to put their prompt engineering skills to the test and evaluate whether GenAI could really help them to achieve a high grade. Because why be scared of GenAI? Why pretend that this technology does not exist and have students use it in secret and uncritically? Why not do it in a seminar with some guidance on effective prompt writing strategies and have them critically examine GenAI output according to the assessment criteria? The final assessment for my module consists of two parts. The first is worth 80% of their mark. Students use GenAI to write a research proposal that they then mark and critique on the basis of module materials and methodological texts. So citations are needed. Can a GenAI do a good job marking and critiquing the work of a GenAI? You'll find out soon. For the second part, worth 20% of their mark, students write a reflective statement on using GenAI for complex tasks, like writing the research proposal, considering the benefits and shortcomings of GenAI and its implications for their studies and future careers. They were encouraged to structure and organize their reflective statement according to a reflective practice model. For the first part of the assessment, marking and critiquing the research proposal, they need a research proposal to mark and critique. Rather than giving all students the same one to assess, I gave students a prompt that will write a somewhat acceptable effort with any freely available GenAI chatbot. The prompt is 500 words in length and instructs GenAI to write a 1,500 word research proposal. You can request this prompt if you're interested by subscribing to this channel, please, and sending an email to the address in the description. The only part of the prompt that students write is what they'd like the topic to be. They replace the part in squared brackets here for what they'd like the research proposal to be about, and they can choose anything that interests them. Students chose all sorts of interesting ideas for this: marketing issues experienced by small businesses, interest in drum and bass music, or raves, and environmentalism, to name a few. As students were instructed in how to use GenAI over the course of the module, they became very effective users and observed the more detail they provided for the topic of the research, the higher the quality of the output they would receive. Two distinct strategies emerged from students. The first was to replace the squared brackets with as little information as possible and get the GenAI to write a vague or ambiguous research proposal that would be easy to roast and award poor marks to. An example would be replacing the squared brackets with the impact of TikTok on student study habits, or even just social media. The second strategy was to get the GenAI to write the best research proposal possible that they might be able to draw on for their final year research module, which is a dissertation or management inquiry. For this, they might enter the impact of TikTok on student study habits, focusing on business and entrepreneurship, or international business management students at Northumbria University in 2024. This should be an interpretivist, inductive, qualitative study involving 10 interviews with students of 15 to 20 minutes in duration. Convenient sampling will be used to recruit participants, and interviews will be recorded on a phone and transcribed by tadhg.AI. The transcripts will be analyzed using thematic analysis, and the research will take place between October 2024 and April 2025. The project plan must show some overlap between the data collection and data analysis phases, and the following ethical considerations must be referred to: ethical approval from a supervisor, informed consent, a participant information sheet, the right to withdraw with no consequences, and the secure storage of data on the university cloud. Submit their prompts, they turn their attention to marking and critiquing the output. For the assessment, students put themselves in the shoes of markers at Northumbria University and mark the output as if it were a research proposal by a student at Northumbria University. They are given their own mini rubric in the assessment brief that describes how marks should be awarded. As they are now in the position of markers, according to university regulations, they can stop reading the research proposal if it is more than 10% longer than the specified length of 1,500 words. So they only have to read and mark the first 1,650 words. No student, however, reported that this was an issue. No matter what tool they used, the research proposal was shorter, sometimes significantly so, than the maximum permitted word count. The marking criteria and available marks are listed on screen. Scope and clarity of research questions or objectives was worth 15%. Rationale for the focus of the research was worth 25%. Methodology and ethical considerations was worth 40%. It is a research methods module, so obviously this was a key criterion. Project plan outlining time-bound activities was worth 10%. The final criterion is presentation, structure, spelling and grammar, and appropriate APA referencing, which is worth 10%. I also provided some supplementary materials with questions relating to each of the marking criteria to assist students with their marking. Are the research questions feasible, realistic, and appropriate for undergraduate research? Is the purpose of the research well argued? Are the research questions feasible, realistic, and appropriate for undergraduate research? So appropriate for an undergraduate student at Northumbria University. Does the preliminary literature review critically evaluate the literature and suggest that the proposed research will do something sufficiently new and interesting, specifying a well-argued research gap, like a new context, novel research participants, or is this an under-researched topic? Are seminal or recent studies on the topic referred to? The big question here is, are the sources real? If not, they could comment on this. Students could show off their good work for this one too by citing recent or seminal articles that they believe the GenAI could or should have included. When evaluating the methodology and ethical considerations, students could evaluate whether all methodological decisions are cohesive and consistent with a single paradigm. Is the plan for collecting data achievable for a dissertation or research module? Has the GenAI included draft interview questions or draft survey questions specifying an independent and dependent variable and commenting whether questions are nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio variables? Are they pre-coded? Are the draft questions well designed? Or are there deficiencies with them that merit comment? Is there some description for how data will be analyzed once collected? Is this appropriate? Have research ethics in the context of student research at Northumbria University been considered? The expectation for this mark and critique was that any comments would be supported by methodological texts. The module was predominantly built around Collis and Hussey, with a sprinkle of Saunders et al., two very popular research methods textbooks, and students were asked to include as many direct quotations as possible to demonstrate that they really had referred to these texts when assessing the research proposal and to justify the marks that they awarded for the criteria. So for instance, when evaluating the project plan, students could refer to the indicative duration of key research activities and compare the GenAI's plan to these to understand how realistic the proposed project was. When evaluating the presentation and structure of the research proposal, students could comment on how well the GenAI used the word count, whether there were excessive numbered or bulleted lists in the research proposal, and whether the reference list fully adhered to the APA style with italics X in appropriate places and such. Some students experimented with multiple tools. For instance, ChatGPT would write the research proposal and Claude would be used to mark it. I provide a list of 13 GenAI chatbots for my module that I encourage students to trial over the 12 weeks. Prompt writing for the module was informed by the Prep and Edit framework by Fitzpatrick et al. And we had some fun in class thinking about how we could get GenAI to mark and critique its own research proposal. For prompt, what is the purpose? Well, I want you to mark and critique the research proposal entered below. Please? Role. What should the role or voice be? For instance, I am a student doing an assignment, or I am a professor at a university and want to provide feedback on the quality of an undergraduate's research proposal. Students commented that the role or voice specified in the prompt had a significant impact on the quality of the output. The explicit instructions described the specifications of the GenAI output. Probably the easiest way to provide detailed instructions is to copy and paste parts of the assessment brief or lecture slides into the prompt rather than writing your own highly specific and detailed input. Citations were required, so students could request that Collis and Hussey or Saunders et al. Or any methodological text should be cited to support claims and statements. For the parameters, the word count should definitely be included. Students had 1,000 words for their mark and critique, and they could also say that they want the output to be in UK English. They could really include anything that they think is relevant here. I think this encouraged some creative thinking, which was great, specifying that the reference list should be in the APA style and that at least 10 unique sources were cited was another great detail they included. After students submitted their prompt to mark and critique the research proposal and receive their output, we then turned our attention to the edit part of Prep Edit, which is concerned with evaluating GenAI output. This is an acronym for evaluate. Did it adhere to your instructions? Is the word count correct? Are citations formatted correctly? Determine accuracy. Is the text credible? Are the marks awarded for the various criteria well argued and justified? Is there any bias? Is the language emotive? Is the logic sound? Are there leading statements or a leading tone? Evaluating the GenAI's mark and critique like this was an excellent exercise for developing critical thinking in students, and I was really impressed with some insightful comments and analyses that they made. Most students commented that the GenAI awarded the GenAI research proposal excessively high marks, usually in the range of 70 to 90%, with 88% being a score that appeared frequently. It was at this time in the seminar that students turned their attention away from the mini rubric that I provided for them to inform their mark and critique, and to the real rubric for the assessment that described how they would earn marks for the final assessment. Students commented on the advantages of using the GenAI for the mark and critique, though there was broad consensus that while GenAI could be useful for generating initial ideas and drafts, it wasn't capable of producing a final submission that could pass the module or achieve a high grade without considerable human input. There was some debate about whether it was even possible to cheat the final assessment for the module. Some students didn't think it was possible, others thought that you could scrape a pass, and what's the point of that? I think it's fair to say that most students concluded that critical thinking and high quality in-depth analysis are irreplaceable skills that cannot be outsourced to GenAI. The final component of edit is transform, which we next focused on. This explores how students could modify or personalize the mark and critique to improve the mark that they would likely earn. Key transformations required to the output reported by students were making sure that the citations were all correct and referred to real sources, including page numbers and direct quotations to illustrate meaningful engagement with key module texts, improving the quality of some arguments used to justify marks awarded for different criteria, and adding text for shorter critiques in order to use the word count more effectively to maximize your mark. And that was the first part of the assessment. We then turned our attention to the second part, of the assessment, the reflective statement on the process and implications of using generative AI for complex tasks like writing a research proposal. Those students could reflect on any aspect of using GenAI in the module that they wished, considering the benefits and shortcomings of this technology and how they perceived it would impact their studies and future career. We spoke about what reflective writing was, and I showed them some anonymized examples from other modules that I taught on where students had obviously used GenAI to write very poor reflective statements that were completely disconnected from what the module was about and contained very vague reflection on activities that they hadn't even done. Using the Prep Edit framework, students then worked on prompts that would write the best reflective statement possible for the final assessment. First, they chose whatever chatbot they wanted to use from my curated list of 13. While students were writing their prompts, we spoke about what they might include and how they might write it. The purpose of this prompt is to write a reflective statement on my experience of using GenAI for complex tasks in a research methods module. I am a high-performing second-year business and entrepreneurship or international business management student who is a deep thinker and recognizes the speed with which GenAI can produce output, though I have concerns about biases and errors in what it produces. For the explicit instructions, students could enter text about reflective writing or attach PDFs or other documents about reflective writing to the prompt and ask the GenAI to include detail from them. Most students included something like reflect on or describe how my thinking changed as a result of, well, some specific example of a key issue or benefit that they encountered in using GenAI. Most asked the GenAI to use the I pronoun or entered right from my perspective, include examples, relate my thoughts to academic literature, making it clear how this literature informed my reflection. For the parameters, students requested that the work seem authentic and less formal, and that it adhered to the word count for that section of the assessment, 500 words. Again, after the output was generated, we turned our attention to the edit part of Prep Edit. Students evaluated whether it adhered to their instructions, evaluated the accuracy of the text, and whether it seemed credible and authentic. They explored whether there were any issues with biases or the soundness of the logic. We then evaluated the GenAI reflective statements according to the rubric for the assessment, and students shared their thoughts. Most commented that the GenAI reflective statement was too vague and lacking in description and specific details of real experiences and evidence of authentic thought to earn a pass, and it definitely wouldn't earn a high mark. However, there was only 2 hours in total for this entire session, and some commented that with more time they could add extra detail that would have enhanced the authenticity. Some students commented that the level of detail required in the prompt to produce an authentic piece of work meant that it would be faster just writing it yourself. Finally, we turned our attention to the transform part of edit. Students considered whether they could modify and personalize the GenAI output in a way that would make it useful to them, and several thought it would be possible to do so, adding real details of experiences and reflections that were relevant to their individual experiences. Overall, I thought that this seminar was one of the best in my module, though I think students preferred the one where they used GenAI to write cover letters based on job descriptions. I thought that this one worked amazingly well. Through this seminar, students not only learned how to use GenAI tools as effectively as possible, pushing the technology to its limits, but also developed a critical understanding of these limitations. I heard later that the experience of the seminar helped students as they reflected on the benefits and shortcomings of GenAI for the final assessment and impacted on what they wrote about how GenAI would impact their studies and future careers. Students said that, reflecting on the process, they appreciated how GenAI could assist with ideation and drafting. However, it made them more aware of the importance of their own critical and analytical skills to refine and enhance GenAI's output. By openly encouraging the use of GenAI, I aim to prepare my students for a future where it is part of their skill set, understanding how to leverage it effectively while honing their unique human skills. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or thoughts on using GenAI in education, feel free to leave a comment below or email the address in the description. Let's continue the conversation on how we can embrace technology while maintaining academic integrity. See you next time.